It's Boomer Life, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Well, good evening and welcome to Boomer Life here on CISL 650. I'm Sterling Fox, and on this episode of the program, we're going to focus on the brain and how people deal with the traumatic brain injuries. It's a pleasure to welcome from NeuroKinetics Clinic in Vancouver, Dr. Philippe Souvestre and Sonia Dheil. Gentlemen and lady, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Philippe, talk to us a little bit about your background. You have this wonderful French accent, so I must assume that you were medically trained formally in France.
This is exact. I grew up in the south of France. My family is from the Pyrenees Mountains.
Aha.
And but I grew up, there is not enough to learn medicine in the Pyrenees, so I had to go to Marseille in Provence on the other side of France.
Mm-hmm.
Still south, and I spent basically almost 30 years of my life learning medicine in the Faculty of Medicine and Faculty of Sciences over there.
Aha, but you grew up in the mountain country of the Pyrenees, that's between France and Spain in the south, correct?
This is correct.
And so that you end up in your adult life many years later in the mountains and near the ocean of British Columbia shouldn't be too shocking to anyone then, should it?
Well, there is a lot of common between the BC weather and the Pyrenean weather, which is caught between the Atlantic and Mediterranean Sea.
Right, right.
And lots of rain as well, and tall trees. It's green, there's a good reason for that.
Absolutely. Now, why did you select, when you went into medicine, and why did you end up focused on the area of the brain and ultimately this career treating brain injuries? It's got to be a compelling story. You were in the French Air Force. You were a flight surgeon as well, weren't you?
Yes.
So did that somehow or another lead you to the exploration of the brain?
Very true. I, as a flight surgeon, and when I began my career after 12 years of medicine, at the time I was still involved in some learning about some specialties such as sports medicine, aerospace medicine, and neuroscience.
Okay.
I have been a performer out of taste. I have been a climber, I have been a flyer, and just loving outdoors and anything that is attached to that. And I always was amazed by the resources a human body and human mind can develop when we have to resolve a given problem in hostile environment.
True.
That has been one of the passions I have and a strong interest who led me in medicine, number one. Number two, to understand how we operate and how this human body and mind performance can take place.
Okay. Now, Sonia, we're going to get you to tell your story, but we have to get Philippe over to Canada first because that's where you two started working together. So give us a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Because we've still got Philippe in the French Air Force as a flight surgeon. So now connect those two dots, please. How did you go from working as a member of the French Air Force to working in the very specialized line of brain injury therapy that you do here in Canada in 2015?
Well, I have been always interested in understanding what I was seeing and what I was trying to do to help people.
Okay.
My capacity of being a physician. And I have been involved in many types of theaters, whether in the military or civilian. I was involved in some expeditions as well, where people are basically sign up to expose themselves for several weeks in extremely hostile environments, and things happen. Not only because of the mission, because of what is the environment they are immersed into.
And would you be a medical observer for these experiments, so to speak?
Yes,
okay.
I was.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I actually learned a lot about this, and I'm still learning a lot.
So well, I'm sure, but I'm probably still constantly impressed by the capacity of the human brain to adapt.
True.
And I guess it is kind of an ongoing lesson in life, isn't it?
Very true. What led me to neuroscience is, for example, this beautiful concept of neuroplasticity, which explains very much and models a lot of abilities we have brain-wise to regenerate, to rejuvenate, and to perform greater performance, even though we should be worn out. Amazing things happen when you are exposed in demanding situations, and one has to resolve them.
Mm-hmm. So all of these experiments and observations lead to a certain point where you decide to come to Canada. What caused you to come to Canada? And by the way, we're awfully glad you made the decision, but what made you make the call?
Well, frustration. France is a beautiful country. I love France, of course. I am a natural over there. All my family is over there, and most of my friends over there. But France is small, and Canada is difficult to beat Canada for space and time.
That's true. Lots of room for everybody in this country. So when did you come? When did you move over?
I moved in 95, mid-90s. It took for me 3 years to make the decision. I was extremely busy in France, as you can understand. I was splitting my career between 3 areas: the military, Air Force and flight test centers, operations, the academics. I love academics. I love training and sharing what I'm doing, educating people and learning in the same process, and of course treating patients.
Right. So when you came here in 95, NeuroKinetics was not a thing at that time, was it? What did you do when you first came over here?
Well, NeuroKinetics, I would like to take the opportunity to clarify what means NeuroKinetics.
Oh, good opportunity to take, too. Go ahead, please.
NeuroKinetics is not a medical specialty. It is just a name I put together to set up a platform and flag it so that I could do my job and provide my expertise to people.
Okay. So did you form NeuroKinetics when you arrived in Canada in 95 then?
2 years later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now it has been an entity since 1997.
Yes, and it has become such an entity that I am approached even by academics asking me about neurokinetics, and they mean a medical specialty here. So it has been astounding.
I'll bet it has. Now, Sonia, finally, you get to come into the picture here.
Finally.
That's right. You joined NeuroKinetics a couple of years ago. You're the office manager, and you're Philippe's executive assistant.
That is correct.
So
yes.
what sort of background do you bring to the table at NeuroKinetics?
Well, I have a bit of counseling. I have a bit of psychology background.
Mm-hmm.
I previously have worked in the medical field alongside with acupuncturists, chiropractors, a lot of psychologists over the years, so about 10 plus years. Aging myself here, but 10 plus years that I have.
It's boomer life. There's no chance of appearing to be old on this program. You're totally outranked by old people here. Yeah.
So yes, that's what I bring over to NeuroKinetics right now.
Okay. Now, Philippe, also, you talking, Sonia was talking moments ago about acupuncture. You, too, have become an acupuncturist.
Correct.
Did you receive that accreditation after coming to Canada, or had you received that while you were still in France before you came over?
That was actually a part of my fundamental training. I was trained in Oriental medicine, including acupuncture, in medical school in France.
All right.
Faculty of Medicine.
All right. So, but did that open up an area of interest that is different? Do acupuncturists deal with traumatic events and traumatic injury recovery differing? Is their approach, is their thinking different than, shall we say, an orthodox Western doctor?
Totally. There are two different models which actually overlap very well. They are not exclusive. They don't exclude each other. If one is put in a place where one has absorbed all the body of knowledge that is relevant with acupuncture, the Oriental medical background behind,
Mm-hmm.
and all of this integrative modeling that Oriental medicine allows to understand the functions and the functionality, physical and mental, of a human body, that is a totally different approach than what we know in Western medicine. But when we blend those two, you get into a place where it's pretty unique. It's like when you reach the summit in the Alps of the Eiger Mountain or the Mont Blanc, and you will see all of these crests and peaks all around you, and yet it makes a total sense. They are not excluding each other. They are part of a vast ensemble.
Okay, so now here in British Columbia, again, a very exciting milieu for you to have chosen to work in because of the overlap of of the Western establishment medical practitioners. And, for example, now in Vancouver, you can get a degree in traditional Chinese medicine. You used to have to go to China for that. So clearly, this little corner of Canada particularly is pretty avant-garde when it comes to the integration of Eastern and Western thinking.
Well, Sterling, you couldn't describe better the actual history of this. When I came here in the mid-90s, I was the core of what would become, within the following years of my arrival here, the College for the Acupuncturist and Oriental Medical Practitioners in British Columbia,
right,
which is another medical college which is totally equivalent by law and by status under the Ministry of Health and the Health Profession Act,
yes,
compared to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, which actually regulates only the Western medical practitioners.
Right.
So we have actually in BC, we have established a blueprint since the early 2000s, the blueprint of medical regulations under the Health Profession Act, and anything that relates to protection of the public and regulation of scope of practice, standard of practice, and the quality assurance in medical practice. We have established a blueprint which is now working his way all across Canada through other provinces. 5 other provinces besides British Columbia have now the equivalent medical college, which is the other medical college, referring to the College of Physicians and Surgeons.
Interesting stuff. And you sit on the board of directors of one of these organizations still, don't you?
I had the honor and privilege to sit for 6.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. And so isn't it interesting, Sonia, to come into this business and see a practitioner like Philippe and his influence on not only our resources here in British Columbia, but at precisely the same moment the rest of the country is picking up on the fact that, you know, they do things differently out in BC for a reason. They're getting results.
Yes, that's correct. I'm very happy, very pleased to have met Dr. Philippe and have the honor and privilege to work for NeuroKinetics. So very, very happy.
So, Philippe, tell us about NeuroKinetics, the actual physical location. How long have you been there?
After arriving here, I spent 6 months extended to 9 months as a visiting physician at VGH,
okay,
General Hospital. I was welcome in the ENT division for 6 months, and my contract was extended to 9 months. And then I have to find a way cooperating, collaborating with other people. And nobody actually would really understand what I was saying or what I was doing, just because the differences in background were extremely fundamentally different.
Oh, I see. Okay, so what I suppose I'm after here is how you manage to break through all of that and establish yourself as successfully as you have become in those 15 to 20 years that you've been running NeuroKinetics in Vancouver. What have you, because you're very focused and you're very purposeful in your work, so how have you built this model over that amount of time?
I think it was the result of consistency, being consistent in helping people who couldn't find help otherwise. So basically, as the new kid in a block, I was totally misunderstood and left behind, or even meeting sometimes some challenges from other established organizations or individuals. And despite that, my strength has become basically the patients. So time and patience were my allies, became my allies at best, to convince that actually what I brought here in was valuable and helpful.
And especially on the side of the patients, because you really have specialized in accepting and rehabilitating patients that no one else will take.
Correct.
They've gone to everybody else in town. They have no satisfaction. They're still in pain. Their lives are very incomplete, and they just want their lives back. Thank you very much. And you will take these patients and enjoy some considerable success.
Yes, it's a lot of hard work, you guess that, but it makes me also very humble in sharing my success, because it's not easy, and God knows how much we are not in control of many things.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, Sonia and Philippe are going to walk us through what happens when someone, now, if this isn't happening to you, surely to goodness you know someone in your life who's had there's been an accident, there's been a workplace event, there's been something on the ski hill, something happened a while back and that person got hurt. And still to this day, lo these many years or months later, it's still not right. And the person still complains. And they don't like complaining, they don't like being a burden, but they can't help themselves. These people in my studio are the people that you or that person in your life need to get to know. We're talking NeuroKinetics on this edition of Boomer Life on CISL 650 with plenty still ahead. Stay with us.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Welcome back to the program. Sterling Fox with you. Joining us in studio from NeuroKinetics Clinic here in Vancouver is Philippe Souvestre and Sonia Dheil. And we're talking about the brain and what can be done for those who have suffered a traumatic brain injury. NeuroKinetics Clinic treats concussions, trauma, disability, pain, and injury. And, of course, it's ever so timely that you would pop in, you two, for a visit because March is Brain Injury Awareness Month, and that is not only here in British Columbia, it's right across Canada. Philippe, is there any difference between a concussion and a brain injury, or are they, in fact, one and the same thing?
Well, one belongs to the other. Concussion is a modality of head injury.
Okay. We see a lot of concern now in sports, and some of the professional sports associations, both here and in Europe, paying more attention to injuries, concussion injuries. And now we see more and more of that focus trickling down to children's sports. Do you think that that is a smart focus? Should we pay more attention to children when they sustain head injuries, even when playing against other children? They're not going to be as severe as maybe an adult would get, but on a comparative level, they are. Is that a good focus? Is that a good concern?
Certainly. The reason is when a kid gets hurt, his or her lifetime to come may be compromised as a result of this head injury. So the stake is greater for a child to be hurt or wounded or disabled even temporarily compared to an adult who has already half, 1/3 or half or more of lifetime behind. And also the capacity to repair for kids is greater than for adults. So altogether you have parameters which make every one of them unique. So we talk about age ranges rather than, child or adult, etc.
But you do treat, Sonia, you do see children at NeuroKinetics, don't you?
That is correct, yes, we do.
And what sort of typical brain injuries? Are they always brain injuries, or are there other types of serious traumatic events that cause people to come to NeuroKinetics as well?
No, there's various kinds. It's not just we do focus, however, on the brain, but we do have other injuries related anywhere from the pain all the way up to short-term, long-term disability. They can come in for pretty much anything that relates to pain and trauma in their life. Okay,
and that would include chronic pain, Philippe. For example, you sustained you were in a traffic accident 5 years ago, and it's never been the same since. And you've been and you've seen chiropractors and you've seen the family doctor and even tried that acupuncture once and nothing worked. You've never been right, and it's been over 5 years. They come to you. Walk us through the process. When a person comes to you at NeuroKinetics and they have this kind of either chronic, constant pain, or there's an event that has caused a brain injury, walk us through the process of becoming a patient at NeuroKinetics.
Well, the first thing is to understand what is going on. So we have a thorough investigation, and actually my background encompasses a training as investigator and forensic medical investigator. So it is necessary to understand all the ties and what are the cofactors, for example, and key parameters to allow someone to be stuck in a given place, for example.
Right, and you talked about in our last segment about your work in the outdoors and observing all sorts of adverse conditions and noting all of the observations. So clearly you are, there is an academic approach to the assessment, correct?
Correct.
So how long, Sonia, would it take? Suppose someone comes in for the very first time.
Right.
They've heard us on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
They know someone who would be a prime candidate. They call that person and say, you know, there's a place where you should go. So when that person either calls you or just shows up, what happens?
From that point forward, we go on to basically what we call a consultation, which is anywhere between about 15 to 30 minutes in time. It's basically getting a brief run through of, or brief history of what they are going through, what they're suffering through.
Okay.
At that point forward, we will actually move on to, if they are comfortable to move on forward, we will at that point move on forward with their assessment stage. Which is where we go ahead and do the assessments. It's a triage, so there's three assessments. First one, we do the testing, come back to the consultation room. They will then, at that point, get all the data that's collected from the assessment, do a run-through with Dr. Philippe, and he will go ahead and let them know that, yes, you can move on forward, or no, you cannot. From then, we go on to level 2 and level 3. Those are our other two assessments.
Is it helpful when people come to you for the very first time? Now, these are people who have been through the mill.
Yes.
They've been to umpteen doctors and therapists and Lord only knows who else. So they have probably accumulated quite a bit of information about themselves. What, Philippe, would be useful for a person to bring with them on that first initial appearance at NeuroKinetics?
This is a very good question, because we actually ask people, we recommend and we require sometimes people to come with whatever they have at hand to start with, including medical history, current treatments, or former treatments, if they remember that, and whatever, and what have been the kind of nature of interventions in the past.
Right.
Whether surgery, whether psychiatry, whether you name it.
And another thing that I noticed when trolling through the website, Sonia,
Yes.
and this caught my eye.
Yes.
And I know this because of previous interviews I've had with personal injury lawyers.
Yes.
I've learned a lot about brain injury from the lawyers and their side of it all. They tell us, and it's on your website too, when a person with a brain injury comes to NeuroKinetics for the first time, it's probably a good idea that they bring someone with them. Because in many cases, a brain-injured person is not the best individual to assess his or her condition, because you'll say, so how you doing today? I'm fine.
Yes.
I feel great. No problem at all. And you look at the person that came with them and they go, she's not fine.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's handy too, isn't it, Philippe?
Absolutely, it's necessary.
So you would recommend that again. Show up with someone important in your life that's not going to tell stories on you, but it's going to be your advocate, your ally in this process.
That is correct. So when they usually do call in, or they send in an email, for example, as an inquiry, I do recommend that they do bring in someone. And it's usually somebody that they feel comfortable with, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, it could be anybody in their life. So yes, they do bring in someone with them.
Okay, and so one should, for that first session, Dr. Philippe, one should expect to spend how much time on that on day one? They bring along a little dossier with some medical information from their previous experiences, which they hope is helpful to you. They show up with a friend or family member, and how long should they expect to be at the clinic on that first day?
So this is a very good question. First of all, we have a sort of introductory time together. And for people who cannot be local, but are flying patients, for example, I must mention that we are essentially a destination clinic. A lot of people are flying in from the four corners of this planet.
Right. I should probably have mentioned that myself, because
Yes.
it's a big part of what you do.
Yes.
You are perhaps even better known beyond Vancouver than you are here. And
Yes.
you have a lot of patients who come to you from points very afar.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's talk about a Vancouver person, though.
Yeah.
On that first day.
So if that person is in driving range, we recommend that person to come with a friend or a spouse or a guardian. And we basically discovery time. Discovery time will take up to 1 hour.
Okay.
We provide this very kindly for free, because we think that before engaging into the assessment process, which is extremely demanding, we want to make sure we have serious strengths to rely on before committing in time and money for both parties, actually.
So
Not
the
only
first
patient, but
consultation is free.
That is
And it's a two-way street, isn't it, Sonia?
Yes,
Not
it
only
is.
do you assess whether you're capable of helping this individual, but it also gives the injured person an opportunity to determine whether he or she might benefit from sticking around and going through the program with you. So there really is assessment on both sides, isn't there?
That is correct. And actually the main reason why we do the consultations is if you're coming in and you're going to be working side by side with a doctor who's going to be treating you, my thing is, and I always let the potential patients know as well, or existing patients, they have to feel comfortable. That's the main key thing, is whoever you're getting treated from, you have to be comfortable. So that's why we do the consultations, and we do it for free, is they should come in, feel for the environment we have in the clinic, feel how Dr. Philippe is, see how I am, see if they feel comfortable, and move on forward.
Well, you're certainly both very approachable people, to say the very least.
Thank you.
So when you have these, now, most of the people that come to you, Philippe, are most of the injuries specifically brain injuries?
No, it's more than that.
Okay.
Before engaging on this, Sterling, I would like to complete for the people who are not local. I think it's important also to know what we can do for them.
Sure, because we're all up and down the east coast of Vancouver
Exactly.
Island, like a local radio station. So all those people who can jump on a ferry and come across, go ahead, please.
Well, the good news is they don't have to do that. We can proceed through Skype.
Oh, okay. So you can do that initial consultation on Skype.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that will not need to be physically present at the clinic.
So you don't have to necessarily pay the enormous ferry cost just to come over and have a howdy-do. You can do that on Skype and save your money for when you need to get the work done. Right?
Exactly.
Well, that's great. That's a nice service to provide.
Yeah, and we love it.
So after that initial consultation, you've had an hour of getting to know you, and both parties decide, we could get some traction going here. We could get something happening. What happens after that? What's step 2 once the initial decision that you would like to accept this individual as a patient, and that person decides this is the place for me? My gosh, you wouldn't believe how many others I've been to. Thank goodness I found you. So, okay, now step 2. What's that?
So step 2 is a consultation, is a session, is no longer a consultation. It is a session which includes investigation, examination, and test. And the tests we use are based on a blend between Western medicine and Oriental medicine, as well as neuroscience and the state of the art of neuroscience. We proceed with part of our test in a sensory deprived environment, which is a black room, basically.
Okay.
Which all parameters are computer controlled, and it allows to understand what is the state of brain functionality. So now we are getting to the brain stuff.
Okay. I wondered, though, if a sort of a byproduct, if you're not dealing with someone, Sonia, who's brain injured, but someone who has chronic pain, living with chronic pain over an extended period of time can really harm a person's psyche. So not only do you have the physical problem, but you also have years and years of living with chronic pain, which can produce a pretty dark outlook on life. It can lead to depression and a few other things. So is part of the assessment process both the physical and the psychological health of the individual?
It's getting to, correct, that is correct. It's getting to know the patient one-on-one. So getting to know as much information as they can provide us. At the same time, it's letting them know that we can only help them if they allow us to help them.
Right.
Meaning if they give us the information, yes, we can go ahead and help them with that information. And we do understand it does take a little bit of time to have that comfort and to open up with somebody, especially somebody who has the anxiety and the depression and the trauma related in their life, related to pain or related to anything.
Well, and I suppose also, Philippe, if you've gone around and around and around the block and you've been to every practitioner west of the Alberta-BC border, you have enjoyed absolutely no satisfaction. Lord knows how much it cost you, and you still feel terrible. Well, then you go see this new guy, and chances are you're going to be a little cynical because you've seen these so-called professionals in the past, and they didn't do a darn thing for you. So you're going to have to break down a little bit of that cynicism too, aren't you?
Totally. This is one of the essential challenges we have. which only ties with the difficult journey and the bumpy journey those patients experience and one would experience in similar places. So what we do is basically we disarm the bomb. And the best way to disarm the bomb here, a way to speak of course, is that we ensure that the patient understands everything that was done to them was done ethically, in all good faith, with all good standards, professionalism as required.
By the previous practitioners,
by the previous practitioners.
Sure, okay.
It is necessary to reset the clock on a nice way.
Interesting, though, that the guy who's formerly in the Air Force would describe a change of attitude as disarming the bomb. But that's because there's a lot pent up in there, isn't there?
Exactly. And, those patients turn into accumulating frustration and anger and deceit.
A lot of baggage emotionally, right?
Lots of baggage. And it is only a normal outcome. So when we explain that this is totally normal, there's nothing wrong with that, and if they wouldn't be so, they wouldn't be human beings,
right,
then we begin to see some smiles lighting the faces.
Because there's understanding of the degree of frustration that years of searching and attempting to get things fixed unsuccessfully, that leads to an enormous degree of frustration.
Exactly. And communication is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Communication allows to listen to the patient and allows to the patient to listen to us. So we set that two-way street, which is necessary for the success of the whole operation.
Okay, so that's step two. Need to take a quick break here. We'll come back and talk more about NeuroKinetics. Our guests in studio, Philippe, Souvestre, and Sonia Dheil from NeuroKinetics, which, by the way, is on Granville Street in downtown Vancouver. It's in the Highcroft Medical Building, and that's at 3195 Granville Street, Suite 60, if you insist. And online, by the way, at neurokinetics.com. Back with more on Boomer Life right after this.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650. We're back. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Sterling Fox. Joining us in studio from NeuroKinetics Clinic in Vancouver is Philippe Souvestre and Sonia Dheil. And we're talking about the brain and what can be done for those who have suffered a traumatic brain injury. NeuroKinetics Clinic treats concussion, trauma, disability, pain, and injury. And, Sonia walked us through, we're just trying to get an understanding of what it's like to be involved or invited into the process at NeuroKinetics. And you've both pointed out, Philippe and Sonia have pointed out, for example, there's an initial consultation, which is not something that's charged for. It's an opportunity for the team at NeuroKinetics to sit down and investigate your case. It gives you a chance to learn a little bit about the individuals who are there to help you, should you accept their offer.
Right.
And so that's the initial consultation. Once that is over and everyone says, well, that wasn't too painful, maybe we should move to the next level. So step two is this whole business of the assessment.
Mm-hmm.
This is where your medical history, any test results that you brought from previous experiments or events get brought in. And so there's Philippe, how long would that second step, the assessment step, the first consultation is for 1 hour. Then you come back for the next occasion. And how long should one be prepared to go through that, what I assume is fairly rigorous medical assessment?
Yes, it is a very structured session, and it will take between 2 to 4 hours.
Okay, all right. So that's, and would at the end of that time, Sonia, would there be at the end of, say, let's do the max. Suppose it takes 4 hours to get all that information organized.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of that second appointment, should there be enough information on the table to begin to develop some kind of treatment protocols?
We do that at the end of the third assessment.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It takes 3 assessments to compare the data from all 3 of the assessments to go ahead and make their customized program.
Okay, so
yes.
I skipped ahead of segment 3. So assessment 3 would then be, you've been twice.
Yes.
Now you've had a fairly comprehensive medical overlook, Philippe, with up to 4 hours in some cases. So then how much time would elapse typically between that extended second assessment and the callback for round 3?
So each session, the 3 sessions are all includes 2 to 4 hours. So it's a minimum of 8 hours, basically.
Okay.
3 altogether, and the maximum would be 14 to 15 hours of investigation and analysis before we touch the patient.
All right. So between assessment 2 and that third and final assessment, how many days, hours, weeks, or whatever would go by?
This assessment can be done 3 days back to back.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Yeah, this
so
is
and I would imagine, because I've said I don't know how many times already, NeuroKinetics is the clinic people go to because they've tried everywhere else and they have not been satisfied.
Right.
Life is still not very much fun, and well, I keep hearing about these guys, and we better go check them out. And so that's so if these people who come through these assessments, Sonia, they know the drill. They've been through this more than once.
That is correct.
And in many
yes.
cases, several times.
That is correct. Yes. And they do voice that out when they do come in.
Well, I'm sure they do. There's an enormous amount of frustration
Yes.
involved in this
Yes,
chronic
there is.
injury and chronic pain
Yes.
sort of stuff. Philippe, what do you mean by trauma? We talked earlier about concussions and brain injuries, but there's this word trauma, and I've used it sort of throwing it around here several times. What do you mean by trauma?
So trauma can be simplified as a definition. It's a complex definition to start with, but because multi-layers and multifactorial. But in short, a trauma would be seen as an event that will overwhelm the brain's coping capabilities
Okay.
at a given time. You can simplify down to that. And trauma can be not only physical, but it could be emotional.
Mm-hmm.
It could be cognitive, in a sense. When somebody spent long hours on a computer in a poorly lighted room with difficult, unstable temperature and so forth, environmental parameters are involved, that could turn into a traumatic experience as well, which is totally untold and unknown because it is subliminal. Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be a really cathartic, horrific event necessarily at all.
It doesn't have to.
Because it's that kind of, but it's that kind of adjective, isn't it, Sonia?
Yes,
that
yes,
you hear
it
and you
is.
go, oh my gosh, something horrible had to happen. He had trauma.
Yes. Yes.
Where horrible things happen, unfortunately, and we have quite a few experiences about that.
I'm sure.
But also, it is a subliminal accumulation of micro-traumas, which will end up at some point pull somebody over the threshold of its or her own coping capabilities, brain function-wise, and then we find that person in a place that could have happened as a result of a gigantic single-event trauma.
Mm.
Very
So-
similar.
So now we've had our 3 separate assessment events.
Yes.
Following that pretty rigorous look at the patient, his or her history, the nature of the injury, and the likelihood of being able to recover, to treat the individual back to as normal as they could possibly ever get. How long, Philippe, does it take for you to prepare a treatment or therapy program for an individual once the assessment has been completed?
Actually, the preparation of the program structure begins at the time of the first of the 3 sessions, assessment sessions. At the end of that first session, as we do with the 2 others, we debrief the patient upon the data we have gathered, and I do what I call tying the dots. And I tie the dots between the data, objective data measured and collected in this sensory deprived room from the investigation, oral interview, physical examination, and review of the medical history through any document we may gather. All of this takes place and is repeated 3 times. And so, as you can see, the prep work for the makeup of this program begins basically during the first assessment session.
Sonia, I'm curious, in some cases, we've touched on this already.
Yes.
If you have a physical problem, you've sustained an injury, you live with chronic pain, and you have been for a long time. You've been around the block, you've seen a bunch of people, no satisfaction, you still hurt. And because you hurt and you have hurted for so long, you're mad, you're frustrated, your brain is not the happiest place to be in the world. So now you have to develop a therapy or a treatment program that is, number one, going to address the traumatic injury. And at the same time, you've got to, I would think, in a parallel way, attempt to engage the person's brain in a positive therapeutic way as well, because you're only going to get better as you think you're going to get better. Your brain is going to help you heal.
That is correct.
So, but you've got to work on the brain as well as the physical ailment too, right, Philippe?
Well, it's all about working on the brain on the different ways.
Okay.
You got a very big point here, which makes us very different from what is done out there, is we trust the patient. I have been flabbergasted when I moved here many years ago to hear the way patients were treated, were listened to, which was none.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the patients, whatever the patient would say, would be filtered and put in a black box within the practitioner's mindset, independently of the real world lived by the patient. So you see the gap, you see the big glitch between the practitioner's perception and interpretation of what the patient says and what is left to the patient once the practitioner is processing the data on their own, not bringing the patient in the loop.
I would think in a lot of cases, from the point of view of the therapy of the brain, even though the injury that causes the pain is elsewhere in the body, a lot of that, Philippe, I'm sure, is going to be involved in just being a very good listener, because a lot of these people are pretty tied up in knots between their ears. They're mad, they're frustrated, and they hurt.
Yes.
And sometimes they just want to pop off. They just want to let somebody have it.
Yes.
And that's part of it, isn't it?
It is.
And then once that's out, then you have a much more positive individual to deal with.
Listening is everything. Understanding is everything. I spend my time sharing with the patients that understanding for the patient what is going on and what will be going on with us is over 50% of the success.
Right. And I would imagine more than a few patients are, shall we say, surprised in the most happy way, Sonia, with that approach, having, well, been put on ignore. Well, you've got this problem. I know how to fix that. I can fix that problem. But maybe it's, no, I can fix your problem. You know, it's about listening.
Yes.
And it's about just being prepared to hear it all.
Well, that is correct. We have a great team at the clinic, so it's not just me and Dr. Philippe. So we do have a great bunch of listeners. So whenever they need a good set of ears or they just need support through a session, we have a great team. So we're there.
We'll talk about the destination. Philippe, you mentioned the fact that NeuroKinetics in Vancouver is, in fact, for some, from many other places on the planet, a very sought-after destination. We'll talk about how that works, and we'll learn a lot more about NeuroKinetics, which, by the way, is in the Highcroft Medical Center building at 3195 Granville Street in Vancouver. And you can check them out online. It's a great website, by the way. It's NeuroKinetics.com. And we're back with more after this.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Welcome back to the program. We have guests from NeuroKinetics here in Vancouver. Philippe, Souvestre, and Sonia Dheil are with NeuroKinetics, and we've been talking about brain injuries and the fact that this is a clinic that in many, many cases is the one that people go to after they've been to everywhere else. And as Philippe described to me moments ago during the break, some see us as a clinic of last resort. And then, once they get there, go, you know, we really should have just come to see you in the first place. We really would have avoided a lot of time-consuming anxiety over these past few years. Yes. So talk to us a little bit about those, because we've been, I've been at least framing the conversation in the sense of Vancouver people. Oh, and I was going to do the website, too. I was going to spell NeuroKinetics, NeuroKinetics. NeuroKinetics.com is the website, right?
Yes, Sterling, but there's an easier way. It's renewme.ca.
Well, that's much easier to say and spell. RenewMe.ca.
That is correct.
And that's the phone. Is that the phone number? Is it 604 Renew Me?
That is correct.
Okay. So, you're very clever. You just wanted to hang me out to dry and make me
Yes.
spell NeuroKinetics a lot. So it's RenewMe.ca, and that'll shoot you through to the NeuroKinetics
That
page.
is correct, yes.
RenewMe.ca. All right. Well, that's very sneaky. I like that. So, Philippe, talk to us a little bit about the treatment programs that you do, not only for Vancouver and BC people, but for abroad. Once you define, as we've described, the process of assessment and the 3 separate meetings and hours of discussion and forensic investigation, medical history, and all of that. Once all of that information is available, and from it, a treatment program emerges. How frequently would a person be treated? For example, is it something you do once a month, once a day, once a week? And I suppose that you can't generalize, but typically, how frequently would a brain-injured person receive ongoing treatment?
This is a very important question because it will demonstrate the nature of what we do. We have brackets, of course. First of all, we are tied and bound to physiological laws, so we cannot cheat Mother Nature.
Okay.
To succeed in what we do, we have to follow physiology, we have to follow a lot of natural laws which are our makeup, whether biophysical, whether biochemical, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
So in short, the treatment program minimum time, whatever the number of sessions per day or per week, will be 12 weeks. It belongs to another paramount physiological laws. So we cannot finish the program earlier than 12 weeks of somehow sustained stimulation.
Okay, so a typical program would last 12 weeks. With what sort of frequency in those 12 weeks? Once per week, Philippe? Twice per week? What would be recommended?
Okay, it would be better to say 12 weeks minimum.
Okay.
Some patients succeed very well and stabilize very well within 12 weeks. Some won't, and there is always a good reason for that, which is explained to them through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So light patients, for example, as we call it, would require probably a session per day every second day. No more than that.
All right.
A heavy patient may require 3 sessions per day, 6 days a week. So you see the brackets can be big.
So if you're doing 6-day-a-week sessions, then you are probably in some acute physical disability.
Well,
or a discomfort, at
it's
least.
a mix of acute and chronic, very often.
Okay.
Because your chronic conditions will always decompensate and exacerbate, transforming part of it into an acute flare, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now I know that we were talking during the break. You have patients coming from Australia, for crying out loud. You had
Yes.
people flying in from Calgary and coming in from Toronto. That's one thing, but you're bringing them in from really Asia, Australia, Europe. Tell us about that, and how do people in Asia and Australia know more about you than we do here in Vancouver?
I don't know. I don't have the answer. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's essentially word of mouth.
Right.
We don't advertise. We don't market ourselves. We don't have the time to do it. We don't have the competencies to do it. And I cannot explain otherwise than what we live with. Over half of our patients are flying patients from another continent or another country.
And they've just heard about you through a connection, a friend. And does the medical community also recommend you or refer people to you as well?
Yes. The medical community begins to be more and more aware about what we do and takes us as a resource for what they cannot achieve. And we are actually working in an open loop, so we are not exclusive at all. We are rather inclusive, and I enjoy working with other colleagues.
Okay, so Sonia, I'm trying to see how the balance would work. If you've got people coming in from abroad,
yes.
And obviously you're very interested in treating people who live a little closer than that and who have a little more better access to go home in the evenings after some of their treatments.
That is correct, yes. However, it's just easier once they are here. Yes, they are local. Depending upon once they're done their treatment program as well. If they do need to come in, once a month or 3 months after or 6 months after, they can. We do actually have a fly-in patient, a lovely girl who I can roughly say came in for pain, and we discovered there's about 6 or 7 other things that's resulted because of that pain. So, I mean, we have that. We had another patient that was very committed. He was a pilot. He flew in regularly, came in from Calgary, who used to fly in and get treatment done from Dr. Philippe. So, I mean, there's a few of them. I can go on and on and on and list off former patients, but, I mean, there's a few.
But you talked, Philippe, earlier in the program about the integration in your mind and the way you do business at NeuroKinetics, the integration of Eastern and Western medical thinking, and how that allows then the best of both to be available to you and your team.
Yes.
That's important, isn't it?
It is key.
And I'm just talking about, again, it's always the big picture. You were just talking about the woman who flew in,
yes.
and because she had pain.
Yes.
And then it was discovered, surprise, surprise,
yes.
that there were all sorts of other issues going on.
That's
Philippe,
correct.
it's always about the big picture. It's that traditional Chinese in Eastern medicine thing. It's always about the big picture. Everything is connected, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, and that would be an important and probably eye-opening part of the assessment process, wouldn't it?
It is.
And I'll bet you more than a few patients go, whoa, I didn't see that one coming.
That's correct.
They
yes.
all say that.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet you're able to start connecting the dots.
Yes.
And sorting it all out. How long had this woman who's currently a patient, how long had she been living with pain before she finally came to NeuroKinetics?
She's been living it for about 10 plus years. She's a former patient, actually.
Okay.
I can probably say for even students or children, there is a current patient that I can roughly think of that I can give a little bit of information on is even activities related in school, for example. School-related activities can lead to injuries. Therefore, we can help with that as well. That
Right.
lead into certain other traumatic stuff in life.
Almost out of time, and just on the flip of that seeing children's coin, Philippe, it's never too late either. This is boomer life. We're talking to, shall we say, people who are slightly more mature than children. But if you're living with chronic pain and you're 65, so what? You can still get it fixed, can't you?
There's a truth, fundamental truth, which is never dismounted through my career. Time is not preventing anything about recovery and healing. What I learned in some textbooks at medical school have been found obsolete and inaccurate.
Right. And, if it's all about quality of life, and there's nothing in the Constitution anywhere that says you have to suffer because you're now over 65 and that's what happens. You don't. And, check it out, friends. NeuroKinetics.com, or what was the shortcut, Sonia?
It's renewme.ca, Sterling.
Renewme.ca. Sonia Dheil and Philippe Souvestre, thank you so much for popping by.
Thank you very much.
I hope we'll have a chance to do this again. Boy, have we ever got a lot to talk about.
Sure
It was a pleasure to be here.
And we'll see you next time, right here on Boomer Life.